This is the Bugatti Chiron Persport. One of the most expensive Bugattis ever made.
There's a history of startups and garages. And this wasn't fully legitimate because it was a converted enclosed garage, but I considered it somewhat legitimate because it wasn't insulated.
Bugatti declared their Chiron impossible to rebuild outside their factory.
And on top of that, they don't think it's possible for us to do it without their help.
You can't just do that in a garage.
Not a technical warning, a corporate statement about who is permitted to touch what they built. Matt Armstrong, a creator from a UK garage, read that statement and picked up his camera. Then Bugatti tried to stop him and made things significantly worse for themselves. Then Jeff Bezos, the man who built Amazon from a garage, reportedly started watching closely a $3 million mythology, a creator the establishment tried to crush. A billionaire who has spent his entire career doing exactly what institutions declared impossible. We are going to discuss all of it. And by the end, you will understand exactly why Bugatti's worst nightmare just became very real. The day Matt Armstrong challenged Bugatti. To understand why Matt Armstrong's Bugatti Chiron rebuild became one of the most watched automotive stories. On the internet, you have to understand what a Bugatti Chiron actually is. Not just as a car, but as a statement. And you have to understand what Bugatti's public position on its repair ability outside their factory was actually communicating to the world. The Chiron is not simply an expensive car. At a base price of approximately $3 million, it represents the outer boundary of what contemporary automotive engineering considers achievable in a road vehicle. The 8-liter, 16-cylinder engine produces 1,500 horsepower.
Very emotional V16, naturally aspirated, 1,000 horsepower, high revving, 9,500 RPM.
The chassis engineering, the aerodynamic management systems, the proprietary electronics architecture. Every component was designed in a controlled environment, with tolerances so precise that Bugatti's own documentation described the rebuild process as requiring their direct involvement, their proprietary diagnostic tools, and their factory-trained specialists. Not as a preference, as a declared technical necessity. That declaration was not accidental. It was a carefully constructed position, one that served Bugatti's commercial interests by reinforcing the idea that the Chiron is not merely a product, but a relationship. That ownership of one creates an ongoing dependency on the manufacturer, that the car's complexity is, in a very deliberate sense, a form of control over the narrative of what the brand is and who is permitted to engage with it. Matt Armstrong heard that position and treated it as a challenge rather than a boundary. That decision, to treat a corporate declaration of impossibility as an invitation rather than a warning, is the moment the entire story begins. Armstrong had built his YouTube channel through a series of rebuilds that the automotive establishment had dismissed as impossible or impractical. Salvage Lamborghinis, crashed Ferraris, cars that insurance companies had written off and manufacturers had quietly hoped would disappear from public view.
So here is what once was a Lamborghini Gallardo. It's been a long time since we've been defeated by a project. We've rebuilt almost every project we've started.
His audience had grown through each rebuild, not just because the work was technically impressive, but because the narrative was irresistible. A creator with a camera and a workshop, solving problems that billion-dollar corporations had declared unsolvable, in public, one video at a time. The audience was not just watching the work. They were watching the argument being made. When Armstrong announced he was taking on a Bugatti Chiron, the response split immediately. His existing audience, already conditioned to believe he could do what the establishment said he could not, treated it as the logical next step in a story they had been following for years. The wider automotive world treated it as either a publicity stunt or a catastrophic miscalculation. Nobody occupied the middle. Nobody was uncertain about which side of the line they were standing on. What changed that calculation was the documentation. Video after video, Armstrong showed his progress, not through selective highlight reels that obscured the difficulty, but through the actual process, including the failures, the dead ends, the moments where the Bugatti's engineering revealed exactly why the manufacturer had been so confident it could not be done without them. And then, in the same video, he showed himself finding a way through, not claiming victory, showing work, letting the footage carry the argument. The engagement numbers told their own story. Views climbed not gradually but in spikes, each milestone moment generating the kind of traffic that algorithms recognize as a signal worth amplifying to new audiences. Comments poured in from people who had never previously watched a car rebuild video in their lives, watching this one because it had stopped being about a car a long time ago. It had become about something the entire internet understands instinctively. The moment a person who was not supposed to win starts winning anyway. And that is exactly the moment Bugatti's calculated position became a liability rather than an asset. Because the declaration that something cannot be done, once made publicly, carries a specific and permanent risk. If it turns out to be wrong, the institution that made it does not simply look incorrect. It looks afraid of the person who proved it wrong. The battle Bugatti could not win. Bugatti's decision to respond to Matt Armstrong's rebuild with institutional pressure, rather than engagement, was, from inside a legacy luxury brand's strategic framework, entirely logical. It was also one of the most damaging decisions they could have made in the specific cultural environment they were operating in. And the gap between the logic of the decision and the reality of its outcome tells you almost everything you need to know about why legacy brands keep losing to creators. The pressure applied, legal weight, corporate communication designed to communicate consequences, the full machinery of a billion-dollar brand deployed against a single creator with a camera.
I've been slowly rebuilding it, and in the last video I started installing a Black Series kit.
Followed a playbook that had worked reliably for decades. When your brand mythology rests on exclusivity and inaccessibility, the response to an outsider attempt to penetrate that mythology is to make the cost of attempting it prohibitively high. You do not negotiate with the premise. You do not engage with the argument. You extinguish the threat before it can fully form. That strategy assumes a media environment in which the institution controls the narrative. It assumes that legal pressure remains in the legal sphere, that the correspondence, the threats, the weight of corporate authority stays between lawyers and does not become content. It assumes that the creator on the other end of the pressure lacks the platform, the audience, and the cultural standing to reframe what is happening in terms that the public will find compelling. Every one of those assumptions was wrong in Matt Armstrong's case, and the wrongness of each assumption compounded the wrongness of the others. The moment Bugatti's pressure became visible, the moment it was documented, discussed, and interpreted by an audience that was already emotionally invested in Armstrong's project, the narrative shifted completely. What had been a technical story about a difficult automotive rebuild became a moral story about a corporation trying to crush a creator who was doing something genuinely remarkable. And moral stories, in the attention economy, generate a specific and extremely powerful response that no legal department is equipped to manage. The internet does not require detailed legal analysis to form a position when the structure of a conflict is this clear. A billion-dollar brand, a person in a workshop, one of them deploying institutional resources to make the other stop doing something that the other has every right to attempt. The side that the internet chooses in that configuration is not complicated to predict. And once chosen, the internet's position does not change. Armstrong's subscriber count climbed. the algorithm responding to the engagement signals that controversy generates, amplified every new upload to audiences that had never previously been in his feed. Sports media adjacent channels, business commentary accounts, automotive press outlets that had never previously covered him, all now had reason to pay attention and to tell their own audiences about what was happening. Every legal pressure point Bugatti applied became a story. Every declaration that the rebuild was impossible became a public target for Armstrong to aim at in his next video. There is a well-documented phenomenon in brand management where an aggressive institutional response to a perceived threat creates more awareness of the threat than the threat itself ever could have generated on its own. Bugatti did not invent this phenomenon, but they demonstrated it with a clarity and a scale that the automotive world had never previously seen. And into this environment, a creator gaining momentum while a legacy brand lost control of its own narrative, came a set of eyes that the automotive press had not anticipated. And that changed everything about the story's trajectory. What Jeff Bezos was watching. Jeff Bezos built Amazon in a garage in Bellevue, Washington. That fact is biographical, but it is also the foundational philosophical data point for understanding every major decision he has made since. The institutional establishments that told him conventional retail could not be disrupted by an online bookseller. The logistics giants,
one of the fastest growing companies in history, would be a bookstore. A revolution led by 35-year-old Jeff Bezos.
That told him same-day delivery at the scale he was imagining was operationally impossible. The aerospace establishment that treated Blue Origin's ambitions as the vanity project of a technology billionaire, who did not understand what rockets actually require. In each case, the pattern was identical. An established institution with a vested interest in the status quo. A declared impossibility designed to protect that status quo. A builder who looked at the declaration, decided it was more fear than fact, and proceeded anyway. That pattern is not incidental to Bezos's career. It is the engine of it. Every significant bet he has made was a bet against an established institution's declared ceiling. Not because he was reckless, but because he had developed a specific instinct for distinguishing between impossibilities that are genuinely technical and impossibilities that are primarily defensive. The institutions that told him the things he was attempting could not be done were not wrong because they lacked intelligence. They were wrong because their incentives required them to be wrong. They needed the ceiling to exist. Bezos looked at who needed the ceiling and drew his own conclusion. According to reports discussed across automotive and business media, Bezos had been following Matt Armstrong's Bugatti rebuild with a level of attention that went beyond casual interest. What the precise nature of that attention involved. Whether it extended to any formal arrangement, any financial conversation, any direct communication, remained a matter of public discussion and reporting, rather than confirmed record. The reporting was consistent and widespread. The specific details remained unconfirmed at the level of private arrangement. What is not speculative is why the story would resonate at a deep level with someone whose entire professional philosophy is built on the conviction that institutional declarations of impossibility are, more often than not, declarations of fear dressed up as technical fact. Armstrong's rebuild, viewed through that philosophical lens, is not a car story.
Without being able to buy parts to repair this Bugatti, it seemed like an impossible rebuild.
It is a case study, documented on camera, in real time, with millions of witnesses, of exactly the principle that has driven every significant thing Bezos has ever built. The parallel between Bezos's own origin story and Armstrong's was not lost on the commentators tracking both simultaneously. Two builders, two garages, two established institutions that had declared the Challenger's project beyond the legitimate capacity of anyone outside the institution to succeed at. The structural similarity is not coincidental. It is the recurring shape of disruption that Bezos has spent his entire career identifying, betting on, and executing against. When he looked at what Armstrong was doing and what Bugatti had done in response, he was not seeing a new story. He was seeing a story he had lived before, in a different industry, with different gatekeepers who were equally convinced their authority was permanent. What reported Bezos' involvement actually means for Armstrong's project extends beyond the financial dimension, which, at Bezos' level, is significant enough to eliminate most of the resource constraints that Bugatti's institutional pressure was specifically designed to exploit. It means legitimacy of a specific and powerful kind that money alone cannot purchase. When the founder of Amazon is reportedly aligned with your project, the conversation moves.
Get big fast. The mantra of Amazon.com and its boisterous founder, Jeff Bezos.
From automotive YouTube to business media, from enthusiast forums to mainstream news. From a niche story about one creator and one French hypercar manufacturer to a cultural moment the entire business world has reason to pay attention to. That is not a problem Bugatti can solve with legal correspondence or corporate statements. It is the problem that arrives when a story outgrows the arena it started in and starts being told in rooms where the people listening have the resources and the platforms to make it permanent, and where Bugatti's century of heritage carries no particular authority. Armstrong has been making his argument on camera for months. Bezos, according to the reporting, recognized it. And the moment he did, the nature of the confrontation changed in ways that Bugatti's existing playbook was never designed to address. Matt Armstrong V's. The $3 million myth Bugatti's pricing model is not primarily a function of engineering cost. A Chiron does not cost $3 million because the materials, the labor, and the research that go into building it are worth $3 million in any straightforward accounting sense. It costs $3 million because Bugatti has spent a century constructing a mythology around their brand that makes $3 million feel like a reasonable, even modest, price for what ownership represents. The price is not for the car. The price is for membership in the mythology. The mythology has several distinct components, each of which reinforces the others. Exclusivity, the idea that very few people in the world can own one, which makes ownership a statement about the owner's position in a hierarchy that the vast majority of people will never enter. Complexity, the idea that the engineering inside a Bugatti exists on a plane so advanced that it cannot be meaningfully engaged with by ordinary means, that understanding it fully requires the specialist knowledge that only Bugatti itself possesses. And inaccessibility, the idea that the car is not fully available even to its owner without the manufacturer's ongoing participation, that the relationship does not end at the point of sale. Matt Armstrong's rebuild challenges the complexity and inaccessibility pillars of that.
Over the past 3 years, I've rebuilt so many cars, but I believe all of this has led up to this opportunity right now.
Mythology directly. Not because he claims to build a better Bugatti or argues that Chiron's engineering is simple. It is not simple, and Armstrong has never pretended otherwise. But because every problem he documents solving on camera, every technical challenge that Bugatti's own communications had framed as requiring their proprietary involvement, becomes permanent public evidence that the inaccessibility, as declared, was overstated. The evidence does not disappear when the video ends. It accumulates in the public record. This is the specific mechanism through which brand mythology collapses in the information environment the creator economy has created. Not through a single dramatic moment of formal debunking. Not through a competitor launching a better product. Through accumulation. Through the slow, documented, publicly visible process of someone doing the thing that was not supposed to be possible, and showing their work methodically and transparently as they do it. Each Armstrong video is not just a progress update. It is a piece of counter-evidence filed permanently in the public record against the mythology. The question this raises for Bugatti's business model is one they cannot answer comfortably in public. Their entire pricing structure depends on the perception that what they sell is categorically different from what anyone else can access or replicate. The moment that perception begins to erode, the moment the question, "What exactly are we paying for?" moves from unthinkable to legitimate to mainstream, the value proposition becomes vulnerable in ways that no marketing budget, no matter how large, can fully address. Bugatti's institutional response to the rebuild was itself a confirmation that Armstrong's project represented a genuine threat to the mythology. You do not deploy that level of corporate resource against something that does not matter. The response communicated, more clearly than any external analysis could have, that Bugatti understood what was at stake. And now, with the reported Bezos involvement amplifying the story into mainstream business media territory, the audience for the central question is expanding beyond automotive enthusiasts into the kind of analytical discourse that examines value propositions with cold commercial precision rather than the reverence of enthusiasts. The garage vs. the empire step back from the specific details. The Chiron, the UK workshop, the legal pressure, the reported Bezos involvement, and look at the structural story that all of it is telling. Because what is happening between Matt Armstrong and Bugatti is not unique to automotive. It is one version of a conflict that is playing out across every industry, where legacy institutions built their authority on controlled access to information, controlled access to technology, and controlled access to the narratives that define their value. The automotive world is simply where this version of the conflict happens to be most visible right now.
Today, we're about to attempt what Bugatti think is impossible.
Can't do that in a garage. There's just a few places in the world with the right equipment and only a few people in the world with the right training to be able to do that.
The creator economy did not invent the challenge to institutional authority, but it gave that challenge a distribution mechanism that no previous generation of challengers had access to. When Armstrong documents his rebuild, he is not publishing a paper that reaches a specialist academic audience. He is not producing a television segment that requires a broadcast deal and editorial approval. He is generating content that the algorithm distributes based on engagement signals, which means it reaches people based entirely on how interested they are, not based on who the gatekeepers have decided should be allowed to pay attention. That distribution model is structurally hostile to brand mythology. Mythology depends on controlled narrative, on the story being told by the institution through channels the institution manages to audiences the institution has already selected for receptivity. The moment an outsider can tell a competing story with higher engagement, the mythology's foundation becomes unstable. There is no institutional lever that fixes that problem after the fact. The only solution is to prevent the competing story from reaching scale in the first place, which is exactly what Bugatti tried to do and exactly what failed. Bugatti is not the only legacy automotive brand watching what happens in this confrontation. Every manufacturer whose value proposition includes a significant mythology component, Ferrari, Lamborghini, Porsche, Rolls-Royce, is tracking the outcome carefully. Because if Armstrong finishes the rebuild, and if the story reaches the mainstream audience that Bezos's reported involvement would bring, the question of what brand mythology is actually worth will not stay contained to one brand. It will become an industry-wide conversation. What Jeff Bezos brings to this conflict, beyond the financial dimension, is the specific and hard-won credibility of having been the outsider who won at scale. Every major disruption he has been associated with followed the same pattern: identify the mythology that props up an incumbent's pricing power and protects their market position, demonstrate through documented action that the mythology is overstated, and build the infrastructure to serve the audience that the incumbent had been overcharging for access to something they did not fully understand. The automotive world's barriers are higher than retail's. But the underlying structure of the conflict is identical to every conflict Bezos has navigated before. Where does this go from here? Armstrong's rebuild, if completed and documented fully in public, will stand as one of the most significant pieces of automotive content ever produced. Not primarily because of the technical achievement, though that achievement is real and substantial, but because of what the story surrounding it revealed about the relationship between legacy brand, mythology, and the information environment that the creator economy has permanently altered. Bugatti's institutional response will be studied in business schools, not as an example of effective brand defense, but a case study in how pressure fails when the story it is attempting to suppress has already outgrown the institution's capacity to contain it. The creator economy versus the legacy institution, the garage versus the factory, the camera and the audience versus the legal department and the corporate communications machine. History, across every industry where this specific conflict has played out in the past 2 decades, suggests the outcome is not as uncertain as the legacy institution's confidence would have you believe. The pattern runs in one direction, and the reported entry of Jeff Bezos, the man who has spent his entire career on the right side of that pattern, suggests that this time will be no different. Bugatti declared the rebuild impossible.
Matty Rimek, the CEO of Bugatti, mentioned it wasn't possible to do in a garage.
But in a Chiron, there's so many electrical wires, piping, oil piping, water piping, fuel lines that connect from the monocoque to the rear section, and they have to split the car in half.
Armstrong documented himself doing it anyway, problem by problem in front of millions. The internet picked a side the moment Bugatti tried to stop him. And then Jeff Bezos, the man who built Amazon by proving institutional impossibilities are just institutional fears, reportedly decided this story was worth paying attention to. The garage versus the factory, the camera versus the legal department. History says the outcome is not uncertain. Hit like if Bugatti had this coming. Drop a comment. Can their mythology survive what Armstrong started? Subscribe, this story is far from over.